Welcome to East Coast Winemaking, the podcast that brings professional winemaking experience from popular wine regions on the East Coast of the United States to wherever you are. I'm your host, John Monnier. I'm a Finger Lakes winemaker, and I'm excited to provide easy access to educational and entertaining interviews with other winemakers and industry professionals. In each episode, we'll cover the background and unique perspective of my guest on how they approach the craft of winemaking. I'm excited for the opportunity to learn from seasoned wine pros and hope these interviews can be informative to both colleagues in the industry as well as relative newcomers. Feel free to email questions or comments to eastcoastwinemaking@gmail.com and follow us at East Coast Winemaking on Instagram to be notified when new episodes come out. If you're interested in checking out my wine called John Albert, you can find info on that at johnalbertwine.com. Hello, winemakers and enthusiasts. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. I have an interesting podcast for you today. The interviewee is me. My friend and colleague, Peter Beecraft, approached me with the idea of sitting down together and him interviewing me so that y'all can get to know me a little bit better and maybe understand my perspective and my experience. So, I talk a lot in this podcast, so I'm not going to talk too much in the intro. I was thrilled to be able to sit down with Peter and share some of my views and experience. So I hope that y'all enjoy this episode featuring me, John Monnier, John Albert Wines, interviewed by Peter Beecraft. Excuse my cat meowing in the background. Anyway, y'all have a wonderful day. Enjoy the podcast.
All right. My name is Peter Beecraft, and I am taking over today. This is a podcast takeover, but I wanted to take over because I think John, you're ready to have the microphone turned on you.
What nobody knows is that I'm going to quit after this. The 10 years of being in the wine industry has been building to this moment. And then after this, I'm going to focus on starting a hedge fund.
Making wine?
Just kidding. This will change nothing. Other than my people will know my story.
So, John,
sorry, if I can just say, Peter came to me with this idea, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to be in this seat. I'm super excited to be answering questions rather than me asking questions. And I just wanted to say on the record, thank you to Peter. I really appreciate the way that Peter relates to the wine world and thinks, and so I couldn't have asked for a better takeover. So thank you in advance.
You're
welcome. Now you're the boss.
Yeah, quiet. Okay, so I thought it was time that we learn a little bit about you, because I think you're at an interesting point in your life where you are starting to wear a couple different hats, and you've been a long time seller master, I would say. Is that the title at Ravines? What do they call you there? Cellar worker is what I would have called myself when I first started. And then assistant winemaker is how I kind of saw myself when I was promoted after the gentleman above me left to work on another project. And then most recently, we had a conversation internally about me taking the winemaker title. I mean, this was like a year ago or something like that, which just meant like slightly more responsibility and I think trust on their end. But I prefer the phrasing associate winemaker as kind of somewhere in between, because I do feel like I take care of a lot of the day-to-day. I have a lot of responsibility in the cellar, but ultimately I also feel like the wines are still Morton and Lisa Hallgren's babies, and while it's not like I have a personal relationship with the wines because I've worked there for so long, but certainly the way that I relate to my small project, John Albert, is a little bit more personal, I think, just in like a human way that it kind of has to be. And so I feel like associate winemaker at Ravines and owner winemaker of my project. Okay. Thanks for clearing that up.
I'll still call you a cellar master.
It's a pretty badass.
No. But before we get into the wines and I want to actually start with the podcast, right? Because I'm curious as to why you did this. Why? So the question is first, why? Why have you become a podcaster? In specific about this topic, which is East Coast winemaking.
Yeah.
What did you feel like you could lend?
Well, the thought originally came from, I was listening to a couple other wine podcasts. The one that comes to mind is Inside Winemaking, which is a great podcast. And like this one is directed, it seems like mostly at industry professionals. He talks with other winemakers and people in the industry. And when we were bottling or doing something in the cellar, I would listen to it. And I found myself like it turning on my creative brain and like wine appreciative brain, because to hear how other people relate to wine themselves and talk about some of the things that they were working on and what made their wine special, it made me... It turned on something in my brain that made me really excited, I was thinking like, oh, I would really like to try this and try that. And so that was, I became appreciative of the opportunity to hear other voices in that way. And one day I realized that was mostly focused on the West Coast, and that I didn't feel like I could totally recognize in what they were talking about, just because they live a very different life than we do over there in terms of the wine that they're making and the way that I think wine relates to culture a little bit. And I realized that I didn't know of any similar podcasts for our region where I could go and hear voices of people who I respected and get their views on things that hit slightly more close to home. And in the same breath, in my mind, I thought, well, heck, over the decade that I've worked in the industry, I've met and made relationships with a lot of people that I think probably have a lot of really interesting things to say. And so I put a list together of just to see like how many people I could come up with to interview that I thought would be fun. And I focused mainly on like head winemakers in that initial list. And because if I, start including assistant winemakers who are people that I know also, the list may be 1.5s in length. And the list got long enough that I was like, hell, maybe I should just like take the initiative and do it. It kind of feels like right place, right time. And also in the same way that first podcast got me really excited about being in wine and fun things that I would enjoy doing in the cellar, the opportunity to sit down with like-minded winemakers for an hour or so at a time and ask them winemaking specific questions both seemed like something that other people would benefit from, but also something that I was really interested in doing just personally in general. And it was kind of like a good excuse to do it. So it was in some ways also selfish, but I think if there are people who relate to the world of wine and are like-minded in a similar way to me, that it would be worth recording and just putting out available to anybody who would enjoy doing it. And at this point, this podcast is not monetized in any way. And I kind of like that because it means that all of the time that I put into it is just purely for the sake of doing it.
So let's talk about that, the time that it takes to put into it, because there's a lot of probably the production of it is, going into setting this up, which is just a couple microphones and into your laptop.
Nobody knows how the sausage is made, Peter. Shut up. Just kidding.
But you've got a specific kind of program that you're using, right?
Yep.
And what? Tell me about that.
Just like
the program, yeah. Let's say someone wants to be a podcaster out there. These are things that I'm curious about. Not that I want to be a podcaster, but I'm just curious about the process of it and how you go into it. Like, what do you need? Is it as easy as just a computer, 2 microphones, a microphone maybe, and some downloaded equalizer software?
Sure. Well, first, let me just say you might be barking up a dangerous tree, because some days I dream about who I might give this off to if it ever gets to a point where I can't do it anymore or whatever, and you may have just put yourself at the top of the list for people to take. To start, I just started Googling to determine how I was going to do this. I figured I needed at least 2 microphones and some software. And in my mind, I just assumed that was the small barrier to entry, and I was happy to put the $100 in or whatever was necessary, plus some hours of time to figuring it out. I use a software that's called Reaper, which is really nice because it's fully available on a free trial. And if you do Googling, I'm sure it's one of the first things that comes up. There are different softwares that offer different things, and some of them are really expensive. And I was not, like I said, not hoping to make $1 gajillion doing this, because I know that my projected audience is pretty niche. And so a small bit of software that just had the basics suited me just fine. I knew I wanted to have 2 or 3 microphones depending on how many people I was interviewing. I just had my first podcast with you, Sonia, and that was the first time that I was interviewing 2 people at once, and that went well. But I actually have a third microphone right now. I shipped it to a winemaker in Pennsylvania for a podcast that at this point probably will have come out. As I'm toying around with how to reach further out on the East Coast part of the East Coast winemaking thing, experimenting with shipping the mic so that I just have some level of guaranteed audio quality, because that's one thing that bugs me sometimes in other podcasts, is where somebody has a garbly, built-in mic or something like that.
Mm-hmm. What about background noise? So presently right now there's a cricket chirping.
Yeah, that may make it through, but
okay. All right.
Reaper, the program that I have, has a setting that you can set. I record a couple seconds of dead noise, so it has the computer knows what the background noise sounds like, and then you can set a setting that will take that out. That goes into there were probably, I don't know, I would totally guesstimate here, but maybe 15 hours of relatively intensive sitting behind my computer doing research, searching and watching YouTube videos and understanding, to be able to gather all the information that was required to make the podcast sound the way that it does. And that has also, I should also mention now that after recording the first 2 or 3 episodes, I started to learn more and changed the way that things sounded. And so it was $100 plus 15 hours of time. Basically, it was the intro to this.
Got it. And then how do you go about setting up the structure of when you're interviewing someone?
That was something that I knew starting this podcast, that there would be a learning curve, that interviewing was probably a skill and that I would need to develop it. And certainly after the first 3 episodes, or through the first 3 episodes, I started to identify what that skill set was. And there were a lot of things. I'm only up to podcasts 10 or 11, so I'm still early on in this.
But this has been a year, right? If that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay.
Within those first 3 episodes, I was able to start figuring out things that I liked or didn't like, more preparation versus less preparation. Spoiler alert, more preparation is pretty much always better when you're going to interview somebody. I started to come up with questions that I liked and tried to determine how maybe not nerdy, but how wine specific I wanted to be, if I wanted to ask the same questions every time or try and differentiate them, to if wineries had different things going on, did it make sense to ask them about that versus just having the same cut and dry questions that I was asking every time. I can't remember where I was going with this.
Well, because I've been on the podcast for an episode. That was probably the most listened to one, I think. No. And
I think it's up there.
And then, but I've also listened to them as well, most of them. And so you'll start with a background of where you're from, blah blah blah, that type of thing, and then gradually you seem to move it quickly into where they are now in terms of the wines that they're making. Seems like you do some research. If you may know these people already, or like with the Usonia one, you did a lot of internet research, a lot of website research.
Yeah.
Because I know that because I just listened to that one. And I guess you'll probably start to hone in on what works best. There's a lot of free talking. There's there's a lot of off the cuff. These don't come off as rehearsed, right? And I think for being a podcaster, your own podcast, in some ways, we're expecting you to be the expert. But I think what's kind of refreshing is that we can tell that you don't know all the answers, right? And I think the part of this podcast for you is finding those answers.
Yeah, totally. It's the thing that attracts me to it is that it's an exploration of what other people are thinking. A couple of things that came to mind as you were talking. The first of which is I don't really consider myself a podcaster, ever modest as I am. I consider myself a winemaker who posts conversations with their colleagues in podcast form. I know that there's probably no distinction, but that's how it is in my mind. The second thing is I was just listening to a podcast that had Mike Rowe on it, and he was talking about his time filming the show Dirty Jobs, and he said his life got a lot easier when he realized that what worked best for him and for the show was that he basically be the steward for the person with the job that they were talking about, and that it wasn't really about him. What his job was to just be the intermediary and ask the right questions and help in that transition from the individual to the TV show. And I kind of consider myself in the same way. I mean, I go in looking to gain as much information as I personally can and am interested in. And that's what I end up asking and talking with people about. But I just go with those notes as like probing pieces to start conversations. And what I've decided that I like best is, it's most interesting if all the podcasts are slightly different. And so I prefer when the people that I'm speaking with have particular views about something, or something comes up and we like kind of go down a little rabbit hole, because it means that each episode is unique, like the first couple, everybody, you included, I asked like, do you use DAP? Are you acidifying? Which like, I still ask some of those questions, but you can only get away with that 3 or 4 times, I think, before people are like, I really don't care. I've gotten like 5 people's answers on whether or not they use DAP, and I don't care to hear them anymore.
But yet I felt like you cared. You wanted to know.
Yes. Like at the time I did want to know.
Yeah.
That was exactly what I was interested in.
But you've gotten your answer. Yeah.
and
it's fulfilled that.
Kind of. Right. Yeah. I mean, my inner interest in the questions that I'm asking myself about winemaking, I feel like change with the season, and not literally like spring, summer, fall, but I mean, what I was asking myself a year ago when I interviewed you is not the same thing that I had in my heart when I was interviewing the guys at Usonia. And also I think it's best, when you can gain more information by asking different people different questions.
When you've taped when you've recorded a show, and we put all the equipment away, now it's post-production, and now that seems like probably a long process, or is it? I mean, you've got to listen to it again. How many times do you listen to this after you've recorded it? Is it like once through and you making any sort of changes there? I mean, you must do some kind of editing sometimes.
Yeah.
So some of these can be long.
Yep.
So you don't want to necessarily to have like 2 hours, even though it would be easy to talk that long for 2 hours. So what's the time frame? What goes into making those decisions? And like, how long would an average show take you to edit and to get ready for release on the site?
It varies so much, in part because I feel it depends what's going on in my life. I have loved every episode, and I doubt that will change. I'm interviewing people who I find always very interesting to speak with, and so there's always a voice in the back of my brain that says, like, you've got to turn this around and get it out, because there are people out there that are going to care about this as much as you do. But this past episode is a good example. I interviewed a winemaker from Pennsylvania like 2 weeks ago, maybe even 3 weeks ago, and the past 3 weeks have just felt like individual days, in hindsight, that trying to find a time to be able to set my computer even at work and listen to it and be able to edit it while I'm trying to do something else is very difficult. So it depends. I mean, if I'm counting just the amount of time that it takes while I'm listening and doing the editing, most of them I listen to through 2 times, at least, maybe 3, depending. I give everybody the caveat, as you know, before we start, about say whatever you want. If you're laying in bed at night and you feel like you wish you hadn't said that, I can go back and take it out. And I think just depending on people's cadence and style of speech, there are some that I feel like I am a little bit more nitpicky about, whereas others feel like they just flowed so well that I know that there's just one chunk that I remember, that I want to take out because we got into an off-topic conversation or something like that.
So cadence or speech, like if somebody has a lot of space in between their words, would you just speed it up or
I do very little editing. Most things that I take out are either if something happened and we had to stop, if somebody said something that in hindsight they feel like the information was not as accurate as they wish it had been, I would take that out. Otherwise, sometimes it's stutters and then needing to go back and start over. So it's just those kinds of things. And I think just naturally some people, or the vibe or whatever, it just leads to either knowing when I'm going in to do the editing that I either have to pay more attention or less attention. Or in this particular instance with the one that I just did, since it's been 3 weeks, I don't have a super active memory of all the things that we talked about. So I will probably listen to it at least twice, just to make sure that all the things that are in there, that I haven't left anything out that I think should be taken out and is worth the 2 hours of my time or whatever, just having it on in the background to take out before it goes out.
How do you like being a listener of your own voice?
It's interesting. In most instances, I hate it. But I think as I get older, and in a funny way, through the podcast form, I don't mind it as much. I think it's both of those. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I don't hate it. I've heard people tell me that I have a great voice for podcasting. I
think I've told you that.
Maybe it was you.
Yeah.
And I think 1 or 2 others, like my mom's friends, of course, that I don't necessarily agree with. I was always a little bit critical of my voice, but I'm 33 now and much more comfortable in my own skin than I've ever been in my life. So I struggle to take that sincerely, but
so let's talk about that. We're going to now just move away from all the technical podcasting questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering those. But you mentioned,
I really didn't expect to talk about that, so I'm kind of glad that people have the opportunity to hear about it.
You mentioned just there that you are at a certain age and you are more comfortable, right, with who you are, and I think probably what you just poured in the glass there, which is your John Albert wine. I think that lets us know that you're more. This is an announcement, that you've got something to say, right? So you're saying things in the podcast, right? But you're also now speaking through these wines, which are under your name, very deliberate. You could have picked a project name, right? But you've been very deliberate with putting your name on it. And so let's talk about, first of all, I want to get this out of the way. Where can we get your John Albert wines?
Currently, my wines are available at Bottleland in Geneva. They have the Riesling and the Cab Franc. I mean, depending on when you listen to this, it may have changed, but they have had them for a while now, and big support for them. They're one of my earlier picker-uppers of my wines. At Once, they have the Cab Franc, perhaps soon to be more than just that. Pinnacle Wine and Spirits in Rochester has all three, and if you're ever coming through Geneva or if you're from out of town or whatever, it may be easiest to order them through my website. I can ship to like 42 states, or they're available for local pickup. They're at other places here and there, but it's like by the glass, and that is only lasts for so long. So
yeah, I know that you've been wanting to do this for a while, a couple of years at least. So your other hat of being associate winemaker at Ravines, right? That's a pretty big job. It's a pretty big job, a pretty important job. I mean, Ravines they're a benchmark winery in the area, and you know, in the U.S. And been doing, you know, what Morton and Lisa put together is you know, just top quality that you're a part of.
Yeah.
That you know, you have a hand in these. I know that you don't necessarily want to accept more of an ownership of those wines, but you know, you have to you know, you have to kind of give yourself that credit at least, because I think you do. At least for and especially you know, as they've given you more and more trust, right? Because which and so the John Albert wines, I think I can remember maybe a couple of years ago. How long have you been wanting to have your own wine?
Let me see. The Riesling is from 2023. So I think I started with the idea at the very end of 2022 into 2023, because I remember the, well, I mean, I've wanted them or thought about what it would be like to make my own wine for long since then, but it was really a serious effort and possibility starting around then, because it took me.
And what made it possible?
Well, when I was at Ravines, like through the time that I was an associate winemaker, an assistant winemaker, like early, I got promoted to assistant winemaker in 2020. And I've been working there since 2015. So during that stretch of 7 years, of the 10 years that I've been in the Finger Lakes and at Ravines, it like wasn't the right place, wasn't the right time. You know, I didn't feel it was appropriate asking for the opportunity to use the space. You know, I kind of wasn't the guy in charge, and I didn't know as much, and I had other things to focus on in hindsight. You know, I was first in the tasting room, and I wanted to get in the cellar, and then I was in the cellar, and then the gentleman who was ahead of me was kind of forecasting his leaving to Pennsylvania. So then I was like, had eyes on his job, and then I got his job, and it was a whirlwind, you know, and so then I just wanted to grow comfortable in those shoes. And then it wasn't until that point where I started to kind of like look around and ask myself what was next. And, you know, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay at Ravines forever, or, you know, like if what was next, the answer to that was something outside of what I had currently experienced, or what exactly. And I feel incredibly lucky to be connected to Ravines. I felt lucky at the time that I originally got hired in the tasting room, and this right place, right time circumstance, and also to some degree waiting it out, that I've done through my job that led me where I am now, you know, it feels very lucky. And I'm conscious when I'm consciously thinking about it, very grateful to have had the experience that I had. You know, regularly I say that if the version of me who moved to the Finger Lakes to get into wine could see what my success looks like, they would have been effing thrilled. You know, I mean, this is like what I came to do. So what was the question? Where am I going with this?
Well,
so for those first 7 years or so, it didn't feel appropriate for me to ask for the space. And then when it came time, when I was at the end of that point where I was asking myself what was next, it struck me one day that maybe the thing to do that would allow me to kind of grow more in my career and as a winemaker and scratch some of those itches that I hadn't been able to scratch in terms of things that I wanted to try or varieties that I hadn't been able to work with, or maybe just to have my own ownership of something in a way that I hadn't before. It came to my mind that I could try and make some of my own wine. So I approached Morton probably within 48 hours of the idea popping into my head, if he would be open to that idea. And I think it was in part just because he and I have developed a close personal and professional relationship. And I think that my time and effort is appreciated there, that he said basically, absolutely, I think that that's perfectly appropriate for somebody in your shoes. And he gladly agreed to let me use some tank space at Ravines. It also probably helped that my production, is itty bitty in comparison to the volume that we're doing. And so my wines go mostly unnoticed, which is something that I wanted to be the case, and it was all I was prepared to take on.
You don't want to get in the way, and you want to be respectful.
Right, exactly. And I also wanted it to be totally separate from my work relationship, because I didn't want to be asking, basically to be transitioning from working at Ravines to only working on my wines, but under the same roof. I wanted them to make sure that, my heart was to be like, I still want to be the man, I want to be your guy, but I'm just hoping to have my little thing on the side.
Right.
And that's how this project was ultimately born.
Okay. The mission. What is the mission? What's the purpose? What are you seeking? What are you trying to discover? What are you trying to show us with these wines?
Honestly, I'm trying to discover discovery. This project from the very beginning has been an opportunity for me to experiment and be the just complete decision maker on wines like I haven't had in the past. I have a lot of responsibility at Ravines, but ultimately, like I mentioned before, I still consider the wines to be Morton's babies, and he still does a lot of the big picture decision making. And so I know that there was some juice to be squoze from the opportunity of getting grapes and then being like, well, your problem now, you know what I mean? So that ultimately is the goal. It's kind of like an educational opportunity for myself, but I'm worried that when I say that, I try to choose my words carefully, because when I say that to people who aren't in the wine industry, I don't want it to come across like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just doing my best to make wine out here. I have enough confidence going into this, and parts of my wine philosophy are pretty stern, that I feel confident that I can make clean, drinkable wines mostly every time, given like a decent vintage, and that something doesn't go really bad, because I have enough experience on fundamental winemaking to be able to do that confidently. This is a more finer, like tipped brush that I intend to be experimenting with. Techniques, varieties that I haven't had the opportunity to work with, from sites that I haven't had the opportunity to work with, just to kind of like feel it out for myself, And
Is that happening with these? Let's talk about these wines.
Way more than even I initially expected.
Really? Okay. So the viewers didn't see the first wine that was poured, but that is the 2024 Chardonnay from La Homa Vineyards, which is not a vineyard that you work with at Ravines.
Correct.
And this is now owned and farmed by Kelby and Julia.
That's right.
Julia Hoyle and Kelby Russell. And this is the 24 vintage. What drew you to that site?
Well, I can't remember who it was that originally said it, but I've heard people say before, if you have the opportunity to buy grapes from a winemaker, that's where you want to buy grapes from. For anybody not in the wine industry, how you farm grapes matters to the end wine. And, things can be overcropped or carelessly grown. Not that I think that happens a lot, but it just means that you should put some importance and some thought into where you're getting your grapes from. And I know and respect the hell out of Kelby, and there was like some conversation in the local industry about his purchasing of this site. And I can't remember how the conversation originally started, but I approached him about the opportunity to buy some of the grapes that he was growing, just because like him related to this vineyard that I knew was well respected was something that I was interested in being a part of. And I felt like I could put confidence in the grapes that I was going to get from there. And spoiler alert, they were awesome. They were like almost perfectly analytically ripe when they came in. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better grapes. These wines wanted to just make themselves.
What do you know about the Chardonnay in specific from that site? What do you know about the soil composition, and what do you know about the clones, if anything?
I don't know too much about it. All I know is that it came from the Knoll, where anybody who knows Kelby Russell and the Riesling that he's made in the past and the Riesling that Red Nude has made in the past, the Knoll Riesling has a lot of, I was going to say local respect, but I'm sure it's both local and abroad, for being, having excellent terroir. And so all I know is that the Chardonnay came from the Knoll. It was handpicked and was gorgeous. Did
you know that the Knoll is his safety word? How'd you make this one? What went into it? What were you thinking? What did you want? I mean, when you were first talking about starting this project, Chardonnay was what you were the most passionate about.
What I always wanted to do, yeah. Chardonnay is maybe my favorite variety in almost every way. I mean, I'm hard to displease, so I like most all varieties, but some of the most significant wine experiences that I've ever had that are the kind of wine experience that you only have, for me, like once every couple of years, where you taste especially an older wine that just feels like something that the experience is more than just smell and taste. You know, the experience feels like whether it takes you back to a memory or it feels like I don't mean to get all woo woo and say spiritual, but like, you know, it hit really hard, have been Chardonnay. And so this Chardonnay that I made in a stainless steel fashion. I like both oaked and unoaked Chardonnays, but I had recently been to Chablis, and I was chasing kind of a Chablisian style.
Which is?
Well,
to you?
To me, it's lightly oaked. I think a lot of people think that Chablis does stainless, but when we were in Chablis, we saw a lot of super neutral barrels. And I think that it's hard to recreate what in my mind and mouth is the Chablis style, only because it seems like their juice has an amount of like richness and intensity that I think is hard to find elsewhere. I don't know if it's the age of the vines or the like the kind of growing season that they have there, or the history, you know, that you just get wrapped up in when you're drinking those wines. But they just like have this full like intensity about them that I was really attracted to. And in any way, there was not a lot of perceivable oak in my Chablis experience. And so I was open to going to an oak Chardonnay, but as a small producer, it's much easier to stay stainless, so I just didn't even consider it.
So there's no oak on this at all?
No oak.
Really? Okay.
My what I was trying to avoid, my biggest...
Because if you told me that it was lightly, like that, spend some time...
You would be able to tell? Or you would think so?
Yeah.
Well, I'm really happy with the way that this wine came out. My one concern going into this wine was not wanting to make a stainless steel Chardonnay that, like, I just didn't want it to be boring. I've had some stainless steel shards that I think just lack intrigue, and Chardonnay is not known for being the most... a variety with the most personality. And so I went into this knowing that I was going to try and do everything that I could to get this wine to show its personality. And so...
what did you do?
I'm going to tell you right now. we're going to talk about the Riesling after, but both the Riesling that I made and the Chardonnay saw skin contact prior to being pressed and fermented. I've heard of a number of colleagues in the industry using this technique, and I think it's a really good one. I really like what it does to the texture and to the aroma, because there's goodies in those skins that to have, in the wine, I think is a good opportunity to bring in some complexity and intensity.
Just a soaking on the skins and then pressing off, or is it a begin fermentation on the skins and then...
Just a soak. Okay. In the cellar, I'm pretty 100% on racking post pressing, and so one of the things that I was worried about when I was going through my mind what I might do is the fermentation starting on the skins, and then when I press it not wanting to calm down and not be able to rack cleanly off the lees. And so the chard sat for 24 hours on the skins in a refrigerator, and the Riesling sat for 48 hours on dry ice. I can stop talking about the Riesling, but as we're talking about skin contact, so I wanted to keep it cold. Yeah. So 24 hours cold in a fridge, pressed, settled, racked. I inoculated with, I'm not going to remember. The yeast that's in my mind is D47, but I'm not sure that's right. Is that a champagne yeast? Do you know D47?
Don't know.
It was a yeast that I found.
D254 is used for chard sometimes.
Yeah, whatever it was one that I found that. So I inoculate everything. Ravines inoculates everything. I'm open to the idea of spontaneous fermentation. I expect I will make a wine in that fashion in the future. It's just none of the little projects that I've decided to work on so far, and the only 3 wines that I've made so far. But keep your ears open, podcast listeners, because it may happen. I inoculated with a yeast that, talked about being good for Chardonnay and talked about tasting notes in the direction of what I was going for, which is away from the buttery creamy and in the direction of kind of like stone fruity, floral, mineral, that kind of thing.
And you found that
to me, this Chardonnay doesn't read that way. And my personal philosophy is that I only believe that the yeast is capable of so much in winemaking. So I inoculated, fermented pretty cool, and then when the Riesling was quite young, I was worried about the mid-palate weight. I had filtered it quite young.
The Riesling or the Chard?
The Riesling, because it informed a decision that I made about the Chardonnay. Okay. When the Riesling was quite young, I was worried about the mid-palate weight and texture. I felt it was lacking pre-bottling. Thankfully, I'm happy to say that perception has changed. But one of the things that I was worried about that wine was that I had filtered it too early. And so that I knew that two things. One is that I had a feeling that giving it some time on heavy lees to give it some texture would work with the style that I was going for. But also, because I was so afraid of what I had done to the Riesling, I was like, I know that I'm doing lees time because I want it to have texture, and I'm worried that I've harmed the Riesling by not giving it enough. So the last thing that I ended up doing with this wine was 6 months on heavy lees in stainless drums before bottling. And to me, the Chardonnay leans in a leesy direction. Which I was happy to say that when I was making this wine, I was kind of had in my mind what I was thinking or maybe hoping it would be, but I really tried to let the wine just be what it wanted. What it seems to have wanted is it's kind of, to me, it's like in the leesy, earthy, kind of salty direction, which I super duper love. Like I said, my goal was to make a Chardonnay that had some aroma and personality in the glass and had some presence in your mouth, so that it was an intriguing drink, and not just like it's I don't know, maybe it's Pinot Gris or whatever, kind of white wine. So, story of the Chardonnay.
Yeah, it's nicely done, and there's a bit of a spicy component on the aroma, which is a nice and intriguing entry into the enjoyment of the wine.
Thank you.
It's it's definitely not thin, but it's not huge.
And it did go through mallow.
Okay, and that helps too to bring that acidity down. So it's and that's going to give the impression of a bit more broadness as well. Yeah.
In the past, I've been worried about mallow. I was under the perception that mallow did a real softening on wine, and that like mallow in a white wine was inconceivable. And then I had a couple situations. I had another one when I was talking with the guys from Usonia. That's not really the case. There is some softening, but like a white wine like this that goes through mallow to me still has life and a happy kind of acidity. It doesn't just like. And that was one of the things that I was interested in experimenting with because we don't do a lot of whites that go through mallow at ravines.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not even the barrel ferment. Chardonnay?
The Chardonnay does.
Yeah. Do you do a stainless steel Chardonnay over there?
Very rarely. We happen to have made one in 2024 that I think came out really well, and I think partially went through mallow. But prior to that, I don't think Ravines had made a stainless Chardonnay since 2017.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to the dry Riesling since you've wanted to do that so much over the last conversation with the Chardonnay, the 2023 dry Riesling. This is from the Limestone Spring Vineyard.
Yeah.
Where's that?
That's the Ravines Estate Vineyard, formerly the White Springs Vineyard.
Okay. It's been rebranded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I first went into this project, the first year that I was going to get grapes, I had Chardonnay in the docket, and something last minute happened to the Chardonnay grapes, and I wasn't able to get them like 48 hours or something, maybe 72 before I was supposed to pick them up or get them delivered or whatever. And so I was, I had told Morton ahead of time, of course, that I was going to take on this project, and I told him that day that something had fallen through with the Chardonnay, and like, God damn, what are you going to do? And it was like the next day he came in and said, John, I was thinking, if you want us to sell you a ton of Riesling, we'll sell you a ton of Riesling.
I'd like for you to give it to me, Martin.
He tried. I wouldn't let him.
Okay.
And I was intentionally avoid making Riesling just because it's the variety of the Finger Lakes, and I felt like selling it in a market full of Finger Lakes Riesling, was just like, I was worried, that nobody was going to want a Riesling from somebody that they didn't know in comparison to all the well-known wineries in the region. But kind of push came to shove, and I'm kind of glad the way that it did. This whole project has been kind of a practice in serendipity, and I'm happy with the way that this wine came out too. I hope to never need to buy grapes from them ever again, but this time I didn't let my feelings get in the way of my willingness to make wine.
Yeah, when I tasted this last, it was over at the barbecue over at Daniel's, and you were presenting these wines there, and the when I tasted it then, I was thinking, okay, I can place where this is from because it's kind of reminded me of a Ravines wine. Right? Today it's different. Today it tastes different. Yeah, it's and as we know, these wines change.
Yeah. I was struggling to taste that day that we were talking about when we were at this gathering together. I think there's something about kind of being in the sun and being outside that makes aroma hard to capture and things like that, changes the way things are. And this is one of these wines that every time I open it, I feel like it shows a little bit differently. Not because I actually think that there's a lot of bottle distinction, but I shouldn't say actually every time I open it, it shows differently. It's shown differently in different circumstances. And so it's not hard for me to understand what you're saying.
I'm not saying that this wine is that there's a bottle variation. This wine is evolving.
Totally.
So and it's evolving into a way that doesn't remind me of that, because I think it would be easy for you to be making wines that could taste like ravine wines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, part of when I got into this, one of the things that I was mentally cautious of immediately was that I didn't want to be the guy who was working at ravines and was just making more ravines wines. Many people love and respect ravines, and I don't mean to say that, I think I can do it better or that I don't prefer what they're doing, but given my close tie with them, I do feel some mental urge to distinguish myself stylistically from them. It also just so happens that Morton and I have slightly different tastes from one another.
Of course.
And he's in a different part of his career than I am. You know, I'm sure he's done much exploration that I haven't had the opportunity to. So yes, going into this wine, especially once I took them up on the opportunity to use their grapes, I was in a headspace where I knew I wanted to make something that wasn't just a direct press, wine from their vineyard site that I knew that they were already making and were going to do super duper well.
Has he tasted these wines?
Yes, yeah. I asked him to. I don't know if he's tasted the Chard and the Cab Franc. You're talking about Morton, I presume.
Yeah, Morton, sorry. Or Lisa.
I asked him to taste the Riesling because there was a time early on that I was worried about it. Let me give you the whole little rundown with this wine. 23, was like kind of a medium vintage, I think, in the Finger Lakes, like wet, as I recall, and high volume.
Is that how you recall it?
It doesn't matter how it was.
Maybe at Limestone Vineyards.
Oh, that's right. Well, we had the spring frost, so that's why nobody wanted to sell me grapes.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, Riesling, it sat on skins it came in slightly under normal ripeness. And it sat on skins for 48 hours. This was something that I was interested in doing. We've toyed with that that technique at Ravines a little bit, and I like what it does. But I wanted to push it a little, and I thought that would also stylistically push it in a direction that made it not similar to the wines that Ravines was already making.
Yeah.
And then pressed. The rest of the vinification was pretty standard, except I filtered early, like I mentioned. I originally was going to try and make something off dry, kind of backed out at the last second. I tried to stop the fermentation with chilling, and didn't stop it didn't stop as fast as I was thinking that it would. Here we go with the learning, right here, it was year one. And it finished quite dry, but I was worried that there might have been just like a tiny little bit of RS left in there that the fermentation might have wanted to restart. And so it was in stainless drums for, I can't remember, like maybe a month or 2 months or something like that. And I was getting worried about the possibility of re-fermenting as I was, if free SO2 lowered far enough or whatever. So I ended up filtering it. And then bottling. And one thing that as I was thinking about this conversation today, I was excited to be able to tell the story to another winemaker. And maybe some other people will find this interesting because at the time it was an experience that blew my mind. This sat in 3 60-gallon drums. It was 180 gallons. And going into bottling, moved it from the drums to this 350-gallon tank so it could be all together, so it would be a homogeneous mixture, and it would be easier to bottle out of this, one bulk tank. And out of the drums, it was showing like fine, just kind of Riesling-y, but not particularly aromatic, kind of closed off. And when I moved it to the 350, it was like the day prior to bottling. And I came in the next day and I, got the bottling line ready, and maybe we finished up the run of whatever we were doing before I ran this through the bottling line. And I opened the top of this 350-gallon tank, and all of a sudden this like wham of this super floral aroma that I had never smelled before, like hit me in the face. And I was like, I stuck my nose in the tank, and I was worried that I had put like the wrong variety in there. Like it kind of reminded me of this Muscat variety that we work with. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? So I'm like tasting it. I'm giving it to my coworker. I was like, doesn't this taste like this Muscat variety? And he was like, yeah, what the hell? I was like, this is my Riesling. And so in retrospect, what I think had happened was I had it in these drums, and they were closed with triclover, like caps, gaskets, and clamps. And I just had it closed for the whole time. And I almost think that like not enough incidental aeration happened, and not as much as I expect that some wines see through like the tops of tank lids. I mean, I think they're pretty good, but not perfect. And I think this wine's relationship with oxygen was just like slightly on the reductive side of things. And that when I moved it, it gave it this opportunity to like touch some of that oxygen. I think I gassed the tank, but and then when I came in the next day, I think it had just crept over to the other side of that like reductive spectrum. And so I was happy going into bottling, and then a couple months after it was bottled, I would occasionally open a bottle and taste it, and I was like, this just doesn't remind me of Riesling like at all.
Was it still floral?
Yeah. I can still smell it in the way that it shows now. Yep. It was that like same really like pungent, to me it's like a pink flowery, like a ripe flower.
Well, Riesling can possess floral.
Yeah, I know it can be floral, but I've just it's never hit like this for me before.
What you did was you let the genie out of the bottle. That's what you were experiencing.
I guess so.
Yes, you did. It was in a very reductive state. Yeah,
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I had Morton try it, and I said, can you just tell me what you think about this? Because it's driving me crazy. You know, first it didn't smell like anything. Now it smells like flowers, but to me it doesn't smell like Riesling. And I had him taste it, and he said, oh, to me this is like limestone Riesling through and through. I was like, well, thank God. You know, I just need somebody to tell me it was going to be okay. You know what I mean? And now I can appreciate it for what it is.
Are you, did you make Riesling in 24? And will you make it in 25?
No, I did not, and no, I will not.
Okay, so that's a one-off
It's a one-off. All these things.
The Chardonnay you made obviously in 24. 25. You are looking to make Chardonnay?
No. I mean, I just plan to use this opportunity to experiment with varieties and styles for the foreseeable future. And I'm really happy with all these wines this year, 2025.
Are you going to be working with different grapes every harvest?
For the time being.
Okay.
That's my goal. I mean, it's the way that I can I feel I'm interested in approaching these wines, and I feel I can get the most out of this project and intrigue both for myself and hopefully also for consumers. Maybe I make Riesling and Chardonnay and they're not for you, but maybe the Blaufränkisch that I'm going to make this year is for them. So this year I am buying some Blaufränkisch and some Riesling grapes for sparkling. And that'll be the first sparkling wine and the first Blaufränkisch that I've made under John Albert. And then next year, I really want to try...
So two wines this harvest.
Yep. Yeah, but I figured I was not going to make a sparkling wine until I knew grapes that I wanted to work with were available. And I really want to get some sparkling wine on tirage because I want to make one for my label, but I also don't want to like turn it around faster than is reasonable, you know?
Also, with using different grapes every year, are you also looking to explore different sites every year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally part of it.
So, the Riesling for this year for sparkling, where does that come from?
It comes from a vineyard called the Argetsinger Vineyard, which is over in Hector, I think, and historically has been a site that Ravines has purchased all of the grapes from, and so it's a vineyard that I know quite well. But I heard through the grapevine, that a couple tons were available. We're looking for homes this year, and so it just kind of seemed like. Right place, right time, meant to be. I wanted to make a sparkling wine, and this is another vineyard and vineyard manager that I respect immensely, and so I took the opportunity.
Right. The Riesling from that site is, predominantly been put into bottle under the Ravines label, even when you didn't have run the vineyard. I've always thought that those wines have been, they're always been stunning to me.
Yeah, they're in a style that I think a lot of people super get into. Yeah. To me, they're super lean and high acid, and they have this like minerality and sexiness and intensity and ageability that, is they have a terroir that's strong as hell. Yeah. I mean, I've not tasted almost any wines that remind me of the Argetsinger Riesling.
Yeah, those are. I put those in another chapter of like whenever I can get my hands on those, I do. But I can see also how it will lend itself to what you want to do, the sparkling. Yeah, because everything that you just said there to describe it is how I would as well. And those are great characteristics for a sparkling.
I totally agree. I'm also have decided, I mean, I have to look at the chemistry, but I hope to be able to put that sparkling wine through malolactic fermentation, which is something that we don't typically do at Ravines, but I've heard is popular at other producers and in other regions as another way of just kind of like seeing how it goes. You know, my feeling about malolactic fermentation has kind of changed in regards to how intense and what kind of impact it has on the wine. And so at one point I would have been afraid and known for sure that was not something that I was stylistically interested in trying. But 2024, John says, hell yeah, let's do it.
Now the Blanc Frankish, where's that coming from?
It's coming from, I'm not sure which vineyard, but a vineyard farmed by Herman J. Weimer.
Okay. And what are your plans for that?
I'm going to make that like I made this Cab Franc, which we'll taste.
Yeah, let's do that now because I'm ready for it.
I made this Cab Franc in
the 2024 Cab Franc from Lahoma Vineyard.
Also from Lahoma.
Yeah.
I made this Cab Franc in a pretty lightly, well, like medium extracted style. For a couple reasons. One is because I wanted to for stylistic reasons, and the other one is because I knew I was going to turn it around quickly. I know that there are a lot of Cab Franc these days. When it's being made into a red wine, is being made into a pretty well extracted red wine. And I was interested to see if I could make it in a slightly more like lighter, brighter, higher energy style. And so I was just really careful with my cap management. I just did super gentle punch downs, which was actually a consideration that I had made based on some conversations that I had with winemakers, one of whom was you and Ian Barry and some others that I spoke with on my podcast regarding how cap management influences style and extraction. And I'm super happy with the way that this came out. Same with the Chardonnay. These grapes were awesome when they came into the cellar. And I think it lends itself really nicely to the slightly less extracted style. I mean, nobody's sitting here and can see, but in the glass it still reads like a red wine. It doesn't look like a rosé. And while I'm talking about its extraction. But to me, like the perception of tannin is much less than in some other styles of Cab Franc. And I think that the aroma is particularly lively and kind of like vibrant in a way that lends itself also well to this slightly lighter extracted style.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Do you dare me to say lighter extracted one more
time? I don't think you have to. I don't even think you have to say lighter, because that didn't cross my mind until you said it. Yeah, so stop saying it.
Yes, sir.
No, when I smelled this just in the glass there, I instantly saw my buddy Peter Bell.
Interesting.
He would be loving this right now because it is so it just captures everything that's beautiful about Finger Lake Cabernet Franc, and that is the strawberries, the fresh cherries, the savory components in there. It's vibrant. It's really fresh. It smells, and winemakers would know what this smell is. It smells like young wine in a barrel, right? Where it's still full of youth, right? And it's so perfumed and aromatic, and it's also a wine that would hit your chillable red.
This is maybe the coolest I've ever had it right now because it was sitting in the cold cellar
it's perfect,
today,
right?
And I quite like it at this temperature.
You have, and I would encourage you to drink most of your reds like that, because when you don't, the beauty that we just talked about goes back inside. Yeah, and the other things, the places where it lived, the smell of its barrel, or the smell of it, or the alcohol, or that, those pop out more. It's when it lives. These wines want to live on a nice end of summer fall day like now, or a nice spring day, that kind of temperature where they maybe need a little sweatshirt. Yeah. That's when they show the best. Yeah, I think. No, I think this is a gorgeous style. So, what are you going to do when people are like, "Oh my God, are you doing another Cab Franc? Are you going to do a Cab Franc again? Are you going to do a Chardonnay?" And you tell them, "No, that's not the mission here. The mission is, I just kind of like." I'm here to play around with all the grapes and test out my theories and new techniques that I want to do. How are you gonna what if we want something like that? You thought about that?
Well, two things go through my mind. The first of which is to say, probably in the future I'll have to double up varieties, and I'm welcome when that time comes. But for now, the answer is like, no, don't think that it's around the corner. And all that means is stock up while you can.
Okay.
The second thing is, philosophically, one of the things that really gets me about wine is even at wineries that are more established, that are making the same SKUs year and year again, the wines aren't the same. And I have always appreciated that if there's a wine that really effing hits for you, that it might be the only opportunity to have that wine in that way, and even going as so far as to say, like we were just discussing, these wines are like alive in their own way in the bottle and are changing. And, maybe if you buy cases of that same wine and you want to have that same experience a year from the time that you're having the thought about it, that opportunity might have passed, and or maybe it will be just slightly different and enjoyable in a different way. And that notion about wine, I think, is like really beautiful and very human and like feels very carpe diem. And so I'm happy to lean into that for the time being.
Mm-hmm. So with a business now you have your own business.
That's me.
And a business is the job of this business is to sell your product.
That was
how are you adjusting to that aspect of it? Slinging bottles, hustling. As we know, the easiest thing is to make the wine, and the hardest thing is to move it,
is to sell it. I was told that as I was getting into this operation, and certainly it continues to be the case. I'm blessed in some ways that I'm making 60 cases of each of these wines, which is like not a lot to get rid of. And even at a modest scale, I was worried about selling out too soon. LOL, how funny was I 6 months ago? Sorry, I just said LOL out loud. That's embarrassing for anybody who hates when people do that.
Don't worry, you can edit it.
I won't. It'll be more honest to leave it in. Selling these wines was one of the things that its shadow hung over me when I was considering this project. I knew that was going to be the hardest part, because even though going into the territory of needing to make all the decisions for the wine and ensure its health at every stage of the process was like somewhat new territory for me, taking ownership of it. It was, I knew 80% of that process, and then all I needed to know was the last 20. Whereas the selling, I've never had to sell wine. I mean, I worked in the tasting room, and so I knew that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But everything from like actually approaching businesses and customers all the way to like the taxes that you have to pay, it was like all stuff that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I've been fully blessed at the opportunities that I've had. I started approaching businesses, and they just started saying yes and being open to it almost immediately. And I attribute that to some of the connections that I've been able to make, but also I think the region and the culture. Are they
subscribers to your podcast?
I think some of them listen. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think part of the my success. Not to say that I'm immediately out of all these wines and now I'm moving into a prepay system with these wines. That's not the case. But I think people's interest in these wines isn't, to some degree, cultural and social. I think people are especially interested in 2020. I said it was 2024 earlier. In 2025, to be drinking super local and from small batch situations that they know the story of, And so I think that between me and some of my other colleagues that have similar operations, we are kind of a value in and of ourselves in a way to suit a type of wine and type of producer that there's interest for. And so I also, based on my circumstance where I'm making my wine and the deal that I have worked out with Morton, can just logistically afford to price my wines at a pretty approachable price point.
Yeah, what are they? We didn't touch on that.
$21.99 for the Riesling and $23.99 for the Chard and the Cab Franc.
Oh yeah.
I don't have a super lot of overhead, and so I can make these small amounts of wine, and I wanted to pay them respect because I probably could have cut the price even lower if I really wanted to, but the other thing was how fast do I need to sell through 60 cases of wine, And so I was trying to pay them some respect in being valuable for the size and the amount of time and thought and effort that had gone into them for a relatively small amount of wine. What was I talking about? Can you remind me?
You were talking about a lot of things, but
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I can't remember what the question was.
I totally can realize being on this end of the situation. Almost everybody that I've interviewed has said, "What were we talking about?" I hope I answered the question, and now I can understand why.
Yeah, and then as a good host, hopefully you were listening. Yeah. Okay, so I want to tie the podcast back in with John Albert wines, and so. The podcast has been a way for you to sort of mine ideas, I think.
Totally.
Right? And you've potentially used some idea. Well, these were kind of before that. Now that you've got a year, you've had and you've spoken with almost 12 people, 11, which I think is pretty good for podcast content.
Oh, thanks.
For people that subscribe. I think once they get into it, the one thing they don't want is to not have another episode. And I know that's tough to do. So I think you're doing, you're doing it the best that you can. They tend to move on to another one or forget about it if you don't have a new one available. Yeah.
I hope to bang out a couple here quickly before harvest so that I can upload some and give some people something to listen to.
Yeah. Can you think of some interviews that you've done since you've started here with various winemakers where you want to explore something that you learned from them?
A couple come to mind. The first, in part because I already referenced them, and also because they stuck out in my mind as ones that, in my time reflecting upon it, were particularly influential, was the episode with Ian Barry at 680, because they have a relatively niche style, and his approach is interesting, and I respect it. And the one with you, I think, especially early on, because I was asking super analytical questions that I was interested in getting to the bottom of, like I mentioned before, cap management and extraction and all that. I mean, I hate to say all of them, but I can't think of one where I finished the podcast without having heard something new or learned something or something like that. Maybe as we continue, other ones will come to mind.
What was it about from Ian that sticks out?
I was really interested in hearing his perspective on his the earthenware vessels that they're using. And also he has this way of, he's somebody who, the way that he speaks, there's something about it that just like, it just grabs the hell out of my brain. I don't know if it's because I have a winemaker crush on him or what. But yeah, I get sucked in, you know, and it happens in many circumstances. I think it depends on what I'm talking about and if I've had wine to drink that day and things like that.
Any of that? Well, none of those techniques necessarily.
I think we also discussed a handful of things that were like, had gone through my mind earlier in that week. And so there was like no time for my thought process to get somewhere on my own. And so, the discussions that we were having were particularly pertinent to what was in my heart immediately right then. And one of the things that we spoke about, I remember, was the concept of starting a wine spontaneously and then inoculating it halfway through as a way to, whether it's to finish the fermentation or intentionally to like try and build depth of character, or like kind of create a similar situation to blending two separately fermented tanks, but kind of in one wine. And I can remember we started to discuss that, and I was like, hell yeah, you know, I just wanted to, it was something that he had had an experience with. And so it just felt like it was clicking in a profound way.
Right. So potentially not this harvest, you'd do something like that?
Yep, that's something I'm interested in experimenting with for sure.
Okay, all right.
I want to try and make something in the most minimal intervention way that I can, and see. You know, I have so
that ties in both to 680, but also to the to Usonio that you just interviewed as well. And I think the question that I'm glad you asked it was, what does it mean? And I think Alex also was trying to figure out what it means, minimal intervention. How would it work for you?
Manipulating as little as possible in any way. I can't remember
and
who
what would
it
be
was.
in a manipulation?
Addition, subtraction. You know, one thing that I hadn't asked myself was if something like skin contact is a manipulation. I think that I would feel comfortable doing skin contact like I did with my Riesling and Chardonnay and still considering it minimal intervention.
All the way through fermented on
skins?
No.
Okay. I don't typically prefer like skin fermented whites. They get texturally a little too aggressive for me.
Yeah.
I'm more of a white wine guy than I am a red wine guy, and I like my white wines. Like textural is great and fine. I like the texture that's in my Chard, but I also like them to be like not too feral, I think is a good way to put it.
I mean, a complete minimal intervention would be to let them ferment on the vine.
You're right.
Okay.
You're harkening back to the Paul Brock conversation.
There has to be a moment where you step in, right?
Of course.
Where you subtract it from the vine and you add it into your environment.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, Paul Brock said there's no such thing as non-intervention wine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But we know that that topic is still up for definition, and
Sure.
It seems to be a very personal, it means something different to everybody.
I agree.
Yeah, and I don't want to say like a religion, but maybe something on the spiritual end of how it speaks to you and what you can also accept for it to still remain valid to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Considering it now, I think maybe not my definition, but the way that I would go about treating a wine in what I would consider to be a minimal intervention way is to consider minimal intervention through the eyes of the people who really care about it, I think, which are the consumers. And to me, what I think consumers want minimal intervention to mean is that there's less stuff that they don't know what it is put into their wine, and less stuff. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And so I would feel fine doing skin contact with it, because despite the fact that it's in an intervention and that seems like contrary to what I'm trying to do, I think that it's in the best interest of the wine and the consumer. And it's like I'm not putting anything in, that they don't know what it is. I would aim for sulfur only addition, spontaneous fermentation, as long as reasonably possible. If I can get it totally dry, fine. But I'm not totally afraid, as is clear, from inoculating. But if that's the route that I were going down, I would be, trying to stay away from it as possible, and as minimal sulfur as possible. Right now, I mean, we are very conscious of the amount of sulfur that I use, and I got that philosophy from Ravines. Certainly, they are, I think, in comparison to some other, I'm under the impression that in comparison to some of our colleagues in the industry, on the lower end of total SO2 additions, but we're not dogmatic about it. And so that means that sometimes we add sulfur when it would be valid to argue that we don't need to. So if I were going to approach a minimal intervention wine, that's what it means to me.
Okay. Not too many more questions. We'll wrap it up here.
I'm having fun.
Oh, good. Crew. You have a crew that you hang out with? Other winemakers, non-winemakers. What happens when John's not like, pulling hoses at Ravines or selling bottles of John Albert at a local pop-up?
Yeah, like what are all the things that I do with my time that make my weeks feel like days?
Yeah.
I have regular friends that I like to hang out with. Anybody who's not in the Finger Lakes wine industry might not know that the winemaking community in the Finger Lakes is a pretty close one, and so there are regularly opportunities and invitations to see other winemakers and hang out with them. And people are throwing parties or just inviting you over for dinner or whatever. I have a girlfriend who I spend a number of evenings with, and when we hang out,
a number of evenings with.
Yes, yeah, not every evening, but a number of evenings.
So lucky.
And when we spend time together, we are not super activity oriented people. We like to cook dinner and sip wine and hang out, talk, watch a movie, play a board game. I also have some other extracurricular activities. I have this podcast. I play tournament paintball, which is something that I can't believe I'm saying at 33 years old. I got into it when I was a teenager and then took a decade off, played through college, and the entire time...
Not just paintball, but tournament
paintball. Yeah,
wow.
Here in Western New York. Turns out the paintball field in Geneva is like one of the hot spots for tournament paintball in Western New York.
There's a place on
Boss
14,
Paintball, shout
right?
out, that's them,
Yeah,
Boss Paintball,
okay.
yeah. And so I play every Sunday, and then they have a local league that has 4 events over the course of the summer and into the fall, and then a final, so 5 total. And at each event, the layout of the bunkers and the field change. And so practice is every Sunday, and then the practice before the event, typically we practice Saturday and Sunday, because the new layout will have come and you have as short a time as possible to get used to the new layout before you go play it at the event. And then, I try to read. I have 2 cats. My mom lives in South Carolina. I just I'm being pulled in all sorts of different directions.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But it does seem like your 2 major passions are paintball and then wine.
I would put my girlfriend above paintball.
Oh, good. Wow, lucky. Good. Well, there you go, John. The microphone has been turned. you. I think thanks for talking and then letting us know about what you got going on, and can't wait to see who else is next on your podcasting.
I know, you and me both. I have a couple names rattling around that, like I say, I hope to bang out before harvest to be able to upload a few in relatively quick succession. I
would personally, if I could put some requests in,
please.
I know that you've done Darren from Pennsylvania, and there's another Pennsylvania winemaker. I can give. I have connections. It is East Coast winemakers.
It is,
right, and that's a large, long area.
Yep.
To do. So I'd love to hear what's going on in Vermont. I'd love to hear about Virginia, North Carolina. Jersey.
Totally.
All of. I think that Virginia and New York have been on the gotten the foot in a little earlier, but I've tasted wines from North Carolina on up to Vermont and New Hampshire, Maine, and there's some really exciting things happening.
Oh yeah.
With all types of grapes, not just vinifera. I do hope that before too long, you can sit Morton down.
Me too.
Because I think that would be just fascinating. He's such an icon in the region, and he's so self-effacing. He's kind of a man of few words, but unless you ask him something, and then he will not shy away from anything, and he has so much experience, and that would be a really interesting one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think he has the thing that is kind of a blessing to somebody who were interested in interviewing him, which is when you ask him about wine, he likes to tell you about wine.
Yes.
For a man for a few words, he really turns it on.
Yeah.
or can sometimes when you ask him about wine.
Just think if he was as passionate about paintball.
Well, thank you so much for taking some of your time first off, for having the idea to interview me. I've had so much fun doing this that I think the next person on my list, I'm actually just going to ask them to interview me again too. And I'm just going to turn this into a podcast of people just asking me about myself.
Well, you're going to have to have say completely different answers, like your project with your wines.
Oh yeah, well, everything that I said was a lie anyway.
Yeah.
So. Totally kidding. I really struggle to lie. So that was all
truthful.
You're
an honest guy.
I try to be.
You're an honest guy.
Thank you so much, Peter.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you all so much for listening. I'm thrilled you could make it to the end of the podcast. If you have any thoughts on questions you'd like me to ask or comments about your experience, I'd love to hear them. Please don't hesitate to email me at eastcoastwinemaking@gmail.com. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day.